VP of Football Operations Troy Vincent got emotional while discussing the shooting of Jacob Blake and the protests we've seen from professional athletes. Take a listen.
But when I saw Doc Rivers and LeBron and George Hill, I think about my three boys. Dang it. And I'm sitting up here every day having conversation about contact tracing and are we going to play ball? And I got a 22-year-old and a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I'm trying to prevent from being hunted. And they're teachable moments, and I'm trusting my Lord. Trusting him. I'm proud of what the guys and the women are doing. As we would say, a unified people always defeat unified money.
Wow. Shannon, what was your reaction to what Troy said?
Skip, I know Troy Vincent very well. I played against him. He's a man of faith. He's very devout in his faith.
And by the way, for those who've forgotten, he was once upon a time the 7th overall pick by the Dolphins.
Yeah.
So he was a really good player.
Yes. Yeah, I think he went to 4 or 5 Pro Bowls.
Yep.
Ended up finishing his career at the Eagles, if I'm not mistaken, Skip. His emotions are raw, like a lot of people. And he's talking about he has 3 black sons that George Floyd, Jacob Blake, Ahmaud Arbery, all that is going through your mind. Skip, you know, I tell the story about Oscar Romero, who was an El Salvador. He was a Catholic priest who was later canonized and became Saint Romero. And he said some things can only be seen through the eyes that have cried. Skip, I remember the first time I really cried for my grandmother is when I found out what Alzheimer's is. And I saw people that that was, you know, married and had been with someone for 50 years, and they didn't recognize them. And it really dawned on me that my grandmother could be afflicted with this, and she wouldn't remember her baby. My grandmother had raised me. I slept with my grandmother until I was 15 years of age. So now, how is that gonna make me feel, Skip? The woman that I know loved me with all her heart, loved me more than she loved her own. Yep. She wouldn't remember me. You see, a lot of people, if you don't have black young men or you don't have a black daughter or son, or daughter, a black daughter or son, Skip, you can't possibly fathom. People ask me, Shannon, what's the hardest job you've ever had? And I was thinking about it, I said, I did manual labor, grew up on a farm, chickens, bale hay, loaded watermelons, picked pecans, clipped onions. You know what I told him, Skip? Being black. It's the hardest job in America because you don't get paid for it. And it's a heavy burden to bear. And you can't get good at it because all you'll ever be is black. And no matter what you become, it will always be preceded by being black. He's a coach. Oh, Doc Rivers, a hell of a black coach. Oh, he's a quarterback? Boy, that was a hell of a black quarterback. He's the first black quarterback to do this. He can't ever be just that. He'll always be black. Boy, that's a heavy burden. And that's a job to be that. And guess what, Skip? Can't nobody teach you how to be black. And you're just born with it. And then you go from there. And you have to navigate your way in society. What to say, what not to say. How to look, how not to look. How to cut your hair, how not to cut your hair. All these things that white parents never tell their kids, we got to have these constant conversations. I have a conversation with my son all the time. You good? I always worry when he calls me like, damn, something going on, Skip, be about to be 28. And I always tell him, I say, son, if they rob you of your dignity in the street, live with it. Live with it. Live with it. Daddy coming. Daddy might be getting ready to go on there with Skip, but Skip will understand, I'm coming. I got the means. We get the best attorneys. We got to go to Ed Garland. We got to go to Slade Eye. Whoever we got to get. We get it rectified. But I can't do nothing if you in the morgue, bruh. So it's not worth it. And he's saying this is raw. You feel the emotion. You hear that from a lot of black fathers. You hear it from Chris Webber. You hear it from Doc Rivers. You hear it from Jim Jackson that used to work here, Skip. Robert Orr, you hear that. And if you don't have that fear, Skip, you know what? I was wondering, I was thinking, I'm going to turn it over to you, Skip. I wonder do white parents ever worry about this? Of their sons, daughters walking out the door, having contact with a police officer and not coming home. I wonder that. I wonder. Because we do. Every time.
Obviously you do.
I do.
Yeah. And obviously we don't.
Skip, and he said you would be naive to think that some players in the NFL are not thinking about what the NBA players did last night.
Yesterday was a very good day for the National Football League. I was very proud of the reaction of that league after what happened with the NBA. The NBA and the Bucks set the tone. That was the first big domino. But the NFL, the players, they spoke and acted well for themselves. But I want to get back to Troy Vincent and how powerfully those words, just in audio, because it was on radio, hit me. It hit me just as hard as Doc's speech that he gave the other night hit me. I want to remind everybody, Troy Vincent is the head of football operations for the National Football League. Once upon a time, for 5 years, he was the head of the NFL Players Association as a player back in the 90s. Into 2000s. And he has risen up the ranks. He is a right-hand man of Roger Goodell. He is a first lieutenant of Roger Goodell.
He is.
He's in a very powerful position, and at times he has to be a little careful about what he says publicly.
He's privy to a lot of private conversations.
A lot of private conversations. And what do you always tell me about Roger Goodell? He represents 32 very powerful, strongly opinionated men.
Yes.
And in the end, he has to try to keep them all happy as best he can. Well, Troy's somewhat in the same boat. So for him to speak out like this, there are some of those owners who won't love what he said.
Of course not.
He started the interview with a curse word, which again, I'm fine with because he said, this bleep has got to end. And it just spilled out. I think he couldn't catch it. Couldn't stop it because that's the operative word for him. That word that starts with SH is his word to describe that has got to end. And he went into how his job right now entails contact tracing in case they have positive coronavirus COVID tests. And he said, I'm constantly having to worry about, can we play football? And he's trying to say, right now, my mind has gone elsewhere because I have to worry about my sons, and the words he used, being hunted, being hunted, obviously by white cops. And one of those sons, by the way, plays defensive tackle for Ohio State. So he's a good player, was highly recruited. And so, not that he cares anymore about that son, but he has one in a prominent position. And then Troy concluded by using a saying that we've heard before, but he said it, a unified people always defeat unified money. Okay, Troy...